A fourth-grade teacher photographed the same gray hoodie on the same thin child for 47 consecutive school days before she finally understood. This wasn't poverty. This was a crime scene. Ethan Cooper, age 10, was being systematically starved by foster parents collecting $9,250 monthly while spending $14 daily on 3 children locked in a basement. The system had failed him 4 times. A counselor, a principal, a SEEPS investigator, and an entire church congregation who called his abusers angels. But when Ethan whispered 7 words at 3:52 p.m. on a Thursday, "Please don't make me go back there," his teacher made one call that would bring 103 Hell's Angels to an elementary school parking lot in under 2 hours. What they discovered would lead to arrests, a $500,000 fraud investigation, and a new law named after a gray hoodie. And it all started because one woman refused to stop counting. This is Ethan and Reaper's story, and the number 103 is the part nobody expected. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. Please don't make me go back there today. Those 7 words, whispered by a child who'd learned that speaking up only made things worse, cut through Ms. Walsh like a blade. It was 3:52 p.m. on May 15th, 2025. Room 214 at Riverside Elementary sat empty, except for the 2 of them, teacher and student, adult and child, the only person who'd noticed, and the kid who'd stopped hoping anyone would. Ethan stared at his desk, pulling his sleeves down over his hands the way he always did. A habit Ms. Walsh had documented 34 times in the past 2 months. She'd been watching, counting, recording. Because teachers know the difference between a struggling student and a child in crisis. And Ethan Cooper had crossed that line sometime back in January. She positioned herself between him and the classroom door. 5'6", not physically imposing, but her body language was clear. Nobody takes this child without going through me. "Ethan," she said gently, kneeling beside his desk so she could meet his eyes. "You're not in trouble. I just need you to trust me. Can you show me why you always wear long sleeves, even when it's hot outside?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. He glanced toward the door, checking if anyone was there, then slowly, carefully, pulled up his left sleeve. Ms. Walsh kept her face professional, calm, but inside, her heart shattered. Bruises, purple ones, yellow ones, green ones, fingerprint-shaped marks from being grabbed. Hard. Multiple bruises at different stages of healing, which meant this wasn't one incident. This was a pattern. "Sweetheart," she said, voice steady even as rage built in her chest. "Who did this to you?" "I fell," Ethan whispered. The lie children learn when the truth is too dangerous. "I'm clumsy." "Ethan, those are finger marks. Someone grabbed you." "Who?" His tears spilled over. "Please don't call them. Please. If you call, they'll know I told. It'll be worse. Please, Ms. Walsh." She reached out slowly, letting him see her hand coming, and gently touched his shoulder. "I need you to be honest with me. Are you safe at home?" Long pause, then barely audible. "No, ma'am." "Are Sophia and Isabella safe?" The 2 younger girls, his foster sisters, ages 8 and 6. "No, we're all scared." And that's when Ms. Walsh made the call that would change everything. What Ethan didn't know, what Karen and David Mitchell, his foster parents, hadn't counted on, was that Ms. Jennifer Walsh had a brother who'd served in the Marines, a brother who now wore a Hells Angels patch and rode with 102 other men who'd made a promise. No child suffers on our watch. His road name was Reaper. And he answered on the second ring. "David, it's Jenny. I'm at school. I need you here. Now." Ms. Walsh's voice was controlled, but her brother heard what she wasn't saying. 20 years of knowing someone teaches you their fear sounds. "What's wrong?" David Reaper Walsh's voice sharpened. "You okay?" "I'm fine, but I've got a 10-year-old student who just showed me fingerprint bruises on his arms. He's a foster kid. Been with his foster parents 7 months. David, he's malnourished. Wearing the same clothes for 47 days straight. Falls asleep in class from hunger and exhaustion. He sleeps locked in a basement with 2 other foster kids. The foster parents are collecting $9,000 a month and spending maybe $400 on all 3 children. She heard David's sharp intake of breath. "Jesus, where's the kid now?" "In my classroom. I'm not letting him go back to that house, but I need backup. His caseworker will call the foster parents. I need people who will actually protect him." "I'm 20 minutes out." David's voice shifted into command mode. "And Jenny, I'm calling Priest. This is Code Fallen Youth. How many kids in that house?" 3. Ethan is 10. 2 girls, ages 8 and 6. Sisters. "All 3 need rescue?" "Yes, all 3. "Then we pull all 3. Stay with that kid. Don't let him out of your sight. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And Jenny, you did the right thing calling me." The line went dead. Ms. Walsh turned back to Ethan, who was watching her with wide, exhausted eyes. "Sweetheart, my brother is coming. He's going to help. So are a lot of his friends." "Friends?" Ethan's voice was small. "Bikers. Men who ride motorcycles. And I know that might sound scary, but I promise you, these men protect children, especially children the system has failed." "Will they believe me?" The question broke her heart. "Everyone else believes Karen and David." Ms. Walsh pulled a chair close and sat down at his level. "Ethan, I believe you. Every single word. And what I'm about to tell you is important, so I need you to listen. Karen and David's act, the nice church-going couple routine, only works when they're dealing with one person at a time. One caseworker they can charm, one principal they can fool. But when you have 100 men who know what manipulation looks like, who won't be impressed by their Sunday best or their grocery receipts, who care more about truth than appearances." She paused. "That act falls apart." She pulled out her phone again. "School nurse first. Linda, it's Jenny Walsh. I need you in room 214, now. Medical documentation." While they waited, Ms. Walsh sent an email to Principal Anderson. Subject line, Mandatory CPS Report. Child Endangerment. Body, Mr. Anderson, I have a student in my classroom with visible signs of neglect and non-accidental trauma. I am filing a mandatory report per Ohio law. Student will remain with me until situation is resolved. Do not contact foster parents. Evidence suggests immediate danger. Send. Then she called the CPS hotline, gave them the address, the foster parents' names, Karen and David Mitchell, 3847 Maple Ridge Drive. Told them about the bruises, the malnutrition, the basement. The dispatcher promised a caseworker within 24 hours. 24 hours. Ms. Walsh looked at Ethan, at the terror in his eyes, and thought, not good enough. She texted her brother. CPS says 24 hours. That's too long. Ethan's terrified to go home tonight. David's response came immediately. He's not going home, period. We'll figure out logistics. Just keep him safe until I get there. 15 minutes later, the rumble started. Low at first, distant, like thunder rolling in from the horizon. Ethan's head lifted. "What's that sound?" Ms. Walsh smiled. "That's hope on 2 wheels." The rumble grew into a roar. Not 1 motorcycle, not 5. Dozens. The sound of engines synchronized, powerful, deliberate. It shook the windows of room 214. Ethan walked to the window, limping slightly on legs weak from malnutrition, and looked down at the parking lot. His jaw dropped. Motorcycles. Rows of them. Chrome gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Leather-clad riders dismounting in coordinated precision. 10 bikes became 20. 20 became 40. They kept coming, pulling into the overflow lot across the street, lining up in formation like soldiers preparing for battle. Except this battle wasn't fought with fists. It was fought with presence, with witness, with the kind of protective brotherhood that refuses to look away. "How many?" Ethan whispered. "I don't know yet, but David said every brother within 50 miles. Ms. Walsh put her hand on his shoulder. "They're here for you, Ethan. All of them." The classroom door opened. David Reaper Walsh walked in first. 6'1", built like someone who'd spent 20 years staying mission-ready even after leaving the Marines. His leather vest bore patches. Hell's Angels rocker, Columbus chapter, military service ribbon. Gray threaded through his dark beard. His eyes, the same warm brown as his sister's, landed on Ethan with immediate understanding. Behind him stood a man who made Reaper look young. Victor Priest Dalton was 58 years old, gray-bearded, weathered face marked by 3 decades of mechanical work and grief that never quite faded. He wore the president patch. His blue eyes were sharp, assessing, gentle. He moved like someone who didn't need to prove anything because everyone already knew. "Ms. Walsh." Priest's voice was quiet, commanding. "Your brother tells me we've got 3 kids locked in a basement, 2 foster parents collecting $9 grand a month, and a system that's already failed to protect them 3 separate times." "That's correct, Mr. Dalton." "Call me Priest. Everyone does." He turned to Ethan, and something in his expression softened. "Son, I'm going to ask you some questions. Hard questions. But you don't have to be scared of me, okay? I know I look like something out of a scary movie." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "But my wife always said God made me this big so kids would know they're safe when I show up. You believe that?" Ethan nodded slowly. Priest pulled a chair over, carefully, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle the boy, and sat down. At seated height, he was closer to Ethan's eye level. "How old are you?" 10. 10. 4th grade? Ethan nodded. "You know what I was doing when I was 10? Priest leaned back slightly. "I was memorizing Bible verses at military chapel while my dad served in Germany. Wanted to be a chaplain like him when I grew up. And I did that. Served 8 years as Army chaplain before I became, well, this." He gestured at his vest. "Point is, even at 10, I knew what right and wrong looked like. So I'm betting you do too. And I'm betting you've been trying to do the right thing. Protect your foster sisters. Keep your head down. Survive. For 7 months now. That about accurate?" Tears streamed down Ethan's face. He nodded. "You did everything right, son. You stayed alive. You kept those girls as safe as you could. And when your teacher noticed, when she cared enough to count the days you wore that hoodie, you trusted her enough to tell the truth. That took more courage than most grown men have." Priest's voice was gentle, but firm. "Now it's our turn. You've been strong long enough. We're taking it from here." Another man appeared in the doorway, mid-50s, stocky build, wearing wire rim glasses that made him look more like an accountant than a biker. which was exactly what he'd been for 22 years. "Priest, we've got 34 brothers outside plus 27 from Cleveland who just rolled in. Cincinnati's sending 23. Dayton's got 19 en route. We'll have full presence within the hour." He glanced at Ethan, then Ms. Walsh. "I'm Marcus Thompson. Road name's Wire. I used to work for the IRS, hunting financial fraud. Your brother tells me there's about $500,000 in missing foster care funds we need to track." Ms. Walsh blinked. Yes. The math doesn't add up. $9,000 a month for 5 years, but these kids have nothing." Wire pulled out a small notebook. "I'll need their names, birth dates, placement dates. I can pull foster care payment records through contacts I still have. If these foster parents are running a profit scheme, I'll find the paper trail. And once we have documentation, we've got them on fraud charges in addition to neglect." A younger man, maybe 44, stepped in behind Wire. Dark hair, sharp eyes, phone in hand. "Daniel Hayes. They call me Prophet. I handle media strategy. With your permission, Ms. Walsh, I'd like to document this operation. Not for glory, for evidence. And to make damn sure Karen and David Mitchell can't control the narrative when this goes public." "Prophet." Priest's voice carried authority. "Check with the principal. We need school cooperation, not conflict. We're not storming this place. We're supporting a mandatory reporter who followed the law." "On it." Prophet disappeared down the hallway. Ms. Walsh looked at her brother. "David, how did you mobilize this many people this fast?" Reaper's expression was grim. "Code Fallen Youth. Priest implemented it 6 years ago after—" He glanced at Priest, who gave a slight nod. "After Priest lost his daughter to the system. When that code goes out, every brother drops what they're doing. Jobs, errands, family dinners. Doesn't matter. A child in danger overrides everything." "My Katie was 8, Priest said quietly, looking at Ethan. Foster care system placed her with a family that passed every background check. Looked perfect on paper. By the time anyone realized they were hurting her, it was too late." His jaw tightened. "She died 26 years ago. And I've spent every day since making sure no other child suffers what she did. So when your teacher called Reaper, and Reaper called me, that code meant one thing. We don't stop until these kids are safe." Ethan stared at Priest, then whispered, "Your daughter died?" "Yes, son. Because the system failed her. Because people who were supposed to protect her chose to look the other way. Because caseworkers believed lies told by adults over truth told by a scared little girl." Priest's voice remained steady. "But here's what I learned. Sometimes the system is broken. Sometimes the cavalry doesn't come from social workers or police or courts. Sometimes it comes from people society tells you to fear. And that's okay. What matters is who shows up." He stood, placed one weathered hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We're showing up for you. For Sophia. For Isabella. And Karen and David Mitchell are about to learn that hurting children has consequences." The school nurse, Linda Morrison, had arrived during the conversation. She was 61, gray-haired, kind-faced, and precise. She'd spent 35 years documenting children's injuries, enough to know the difference between playground accidents and intentional harm. She photographed Ethan's arms from multiple angles, close-ups of each bruise. She measured them with a small ruler, noting the width and spacing of the fingerprint marks. She wrote in her documentation log with clinical precision. 4 distinct bruises on left forearm, purple coloring indicating recent injury, estimated 2 to 4 days old. 3 bruises on right forearm showing yellow and green coloring, estimated 7 to 14 days old. Pattern consistent with being grabbed forcefully by adult hand. Multiple injuries at various healing stages indicate repeated incidents over time. In my professional assessment, these injuries are consistent with non-accidental trauma. She examined his hands, his neck, checked his scalp, asked gentle questions about whether anything else hurt, noted his weight, 58 pounds, dangerously underweight for a 10-year-old boy who should weigh 68 to 75 pounds. When she finished, she handed her documentation to Ms. Walsh. This is medical evidence. When CPS arrives, give them this. It's not hearsay. It's not subjective observation. It's documented proof that this child has been harmed. Thank you, Linda. The nurse looked at Priest. You're the motorcycle club president? Yes, ma'am. Good, because CPS already failed this child once. They came to that house 3 weeks ago and walked away. So whatever you're planning, make sure these kids don't go back there. Priest's expression was granite. Ma'am, I promise you, those foster parents will never touch these children again. By 5:00 p.m., 103 motorcycles lined the parking lot. Ethan stood at the window, Ms. Walsh beside him, watching as more bikes arrived. Cleveland chapter, Cincinnati, Dayton. Brothers from 4 different cities, converging on Riverside Elementary because one teacher had called her brother and one brother had activated a code. Principal Anderson appeared in the doorway, looking pale. Ms. Walsh, there are over 100 motorcycles outside my school. Yes, Mr. Anderson. Those are my brother's friends. They're here to ensure Ethan's safety while we wait for CPS. This is highly irregular. So is a child being starved and beaten in a licensed foster home while everyone looks the other way. Ms. Walsh's voice was steel. I filed a mandatory report. I have medical documentation. I have witness testimony. And I have 103 men who refuse to let this child go back to his abusers while we wait for a system that already failed him 3 times to maybe show up in 24 hours. Priest stepped forward, extended his hand. Principal Anderson, Victor Dalton. I apologize for the dramatic presence. We're not here to cause problems. We're here to support Ms. Walsh in following the law. She's a mandatory reporter who discovered evidence of child abuse. We're simply ensuring the victim remains safe during the investigation process. Anderson reluctantly shook his hand. The optics of this, Reaper interrupted, are that your school finally protected a kid who's been failing in plain sight for 7 months. Optics are that a teacher cared enough to count 47 days. Optics are that when the system moved too slow, a community showed up fast. Prophet appeared with his phone. Principal Anderson, local news is asking questions. Here's what I'm recommending. You issue a statement that Riverside Elementary staff followed mandatory reporting protocols, that the student is safe, and that community members are cooperating with authorities. You can be the principal who protected a child, or the principal who worried about parking lot appearances while a 10-year-old went back to his abusers. Your choice. Anderson looked between Prophet, Priest, Reaper, and Ms. Walsh, then at Ethan, still standing by the window, thin and exhausted and hopeful for the first time in months. Fine. The child stays here until proper authorities arrive. But I want a written statement from your club that you're not interfering with school operations. Done. Priest pulled out his phone, typed something, showed Anderson. Legal cooperation statement. We're peaceful witnesses supporting a mandatory reporter, not interfering, not threatening, just present. Anderson read it, nodded stiffly, and left. Ms. Walsh exhaled. Thank you. He came around. Priest smiled slightly. Most people do when they realize we're not the villains in this story. Wire appeared with a laptop. Got payment records. Ohio Department of Job and Family Services confirmed placement dates and monthly payments. Want to hear something that'll make your blood boil? Everyone turned to listen. Ethan. Placed October 2024. $2,150 monthly. Sophia and Isabella Martinez. Placed November 2024, $6,400 monthly combined because they're a sibling group. Total current monthly income from these 3 kids, $9,250. That's $111,000 annually. Tax-free. Ms. Walsh felt sick. How much are they actually spending on the kids? Wire pulled up another screen. I got into their credit card records. Don't ask how, you don't want to know. Food purchases for 5 people average $400 monthly. Children's clothing purchases in the last 7 months, 0. School supply purchases, $43 total. Medical expenses for kids. 1 urgent care visit in December, insurance covered it. Their profit margin after minimal child expenses is approximately $8,000 to $800 monthly. Over $100,000 a year, Reaper said quietly. They're running a business. Kids are inventory. Wire nodded grimly. And it gets worse. I found previous foster placements. They've had 11 different children over 5 years. Average placement length, 6 to 8 months. None adopted. None long-term. Every single one of those kids was a revenue source that got cycled out when they became too difficult or started asking uncomfortable questions. 11 children, Ms. Walsh whispered. How many of them were hurt? We're going to find out. Priest pulled out his phone. Wire, send me those names. Prophet, reach out to former foster kids if you can track them. We need testimony. If the Mitchells have been doing this for 5 years, there are witnesses who aged out or got moved. Someone will talk. Another man stepped into the classroom, older, early 60s, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd seen combat. He wore a medical patch on his vest. James Rodriguez. They call me Bones. Combat medic Vietnam. Been carrying a med kit for 55 years. He looked at Ethan. Son, when was the last time you saw a doctor? Ethan thought. September. School health check. And you're thin, bruised, exhausted. Your foster parents take you to doctors? No, sir. Karen says doctors are expensive and kids don't need them unless they're dying. Bones's jaw tightened. Right. So neglect plus medical neglect. When we get these kids out, I'm doing full health assessments on all 3. Document everything. A younger man, maybe 49, appeared with 3 backpacks. He was tall, lean, scholarly looking, despite the leather vest. He wore a teacher patch. Thomas Morrison. Used to teach high school history before budget cuts. Still volunteer with literacy programs. He held up the backpacks. I've got kid emergency kits. Change of clothes, snacks, water, small toys, toothbrush, blanket. Figured they might need comfort items. Ms. Walsh's eyes stung with tears. You came prepared? Code Fallen Youth means we plan for child rescue operations. We've got protocols. Teacher knelt beside Ethan. Hey, buddy, you hungry? Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on the backpack. Teacher unzipped it, pulled out a granola bar, apple slices. Juice box. Start with this. Not too much too fast if you haven't been eating regular. Ethan took the food with shaking hands, opened the granola bar like it was treasure, ate slowly, carefully, like he was afraid someone would take it away. Every adult in that room watched a 10-year-old boy eat a granola bar like it was the first meal he'd had in days. Because it probably was. How many brothers are outside now? Ms. Walsh asked. 81, Reaper said, checking his phone. Rest are en route. We'll have full 103 within the hour. What's the plan? Priest crossed his arms. Right now? We wait for CPS while maintaining protective presence. Ethan stays here with you until proper custody is established. When CPS arrives, we have medical documentation, witness testimony, and financial evidence ready. We make it impossible for them to close this case like they did 3 weeks ago. And when they remove the kids, we follow. Wherever they place these children, we maintain presence. Not intrusive, just visible. Karen and David Mitchell need to know they can't retaliate, can't threaten, can't intimidate witnesses, and if CPS tries to send these kids back to that house..." Priest's voice went cold. "We make it clear that's not happening." Ms. Walsh looked at her brother. "Is this legal? We're private citizens exercising our right to peaceful assembly in support of a child welfare case. We're not threatening anyone. We're not breaking any laws. We're just present." Reaper smiled grimly. "Turns out when 103 men show up to care about 3 foster kids, suddenly everyone starts caring. Funny how that works." Prophet appeared again. "CPS is sending someone now. Not 24 hours. Now. They said, given the community response and available medical evidence, they're expediting." Translation, Wire said. 103 motorcycles made them nervous enough to actually do their jobs. Priest nodded. "Good. That's exactly why we're here." At 6:47 p.m., the CPS investigator arrived. Her name was Michelle Garrett, 38 years old, with the exhausted look of someone who'd been doing this job too long, with too little support. She walked into room 214, carrying a tablet and a file folder, expecting to find a hysterical teacher and an exaggerating child. What she found instead was 103 motorcycles in the parking lot, a teacher with 2 months of documentation, a school nurse with medical evidence, and a Hells Angels president who greeted her with calm professionalism. "Miss Garrett." Priest extended his hand. "Victor Dalton. I'm here as a community witness supporting Ms. Walsh's mandatory report." Michelle looked around the room, at the bikers, at the documentation spread across Ms. Walsh's desk, at Ethan, sitting in the corner with teacher, eating his 3rd granola bar. "This is unusual," she said carefully. "So is a child being failed by the system 3 times in 7 months." Ms. Walsh handed her the medical report. Nurse Morrison documented his injuries, fingerprint pattern bruising at multiple healing stages, malnutrition, 15 pounds underweight. And before you ask, yes, this is the same house you investigated 3 weeks ago. Michelle's face tightened. She opened her tablet, pulled up a file. "The Mitchell residence. We received a neighbor complaint April 24th. Investigator Sarah Rodriguez conducted a home visit April 26th. Found adequate conditions. Case closed." "Adequate conditions," Reaper repeated flatly. "Did that investigator interview the children privately, or were the foster parents present?" Michelle hesitated. "The report indicates foster parents were present during child interviews, which is standard protocol. Standard protocol that allows abusers to intimidate victims into silence." Priest's voice remained calm but firm. "Ms. Garrett, I'm not here to make your job harder. I'm here to make sure you have everything you need to do it right. We have medical documentation. We have financial evidence of fraud. We have witness testimony. And we have 3 children who need emergency removal tonight. I can't just remove children without following proper procedures." Wire stepped forward with his laptop. "Ma'am, I'm Marcus Thompson, former IRS forensic investigator. With your permission, I'd like to show you the financial evidence we've compiled." Michelle blinked. "You investigated their finances?" "Public records. Payment history from state databases. Credit card purchases that are part of court records from an unrelated case." Wire turned his screen toward her. "Karen and David Mitchell receive $9,250 monthly for fostering 3 children. Over 5 years, they've received approximately $555,000 in foster care payments. Their documented spending on children, $28,000 total. That's a $527,000 discrepancy." Michelle stared at the numbers. That's fraud. That's systematic exploitation of vulnerable children for profit." Wire pulled up another screen. And here's the pattern. 11 different foster children over 5 years. Average placement, 6 to 8 months. None adopted. They cycle kids through, collect the payments, provide minimal care, and when children start showing distress or asking questions, they request new placements. Do you have testimony from previous foster children? Prophet stepped forward. Working on it. I've located 3 former foster kids who aged out or were moved. 2 have agreed to speak with authorities. 1 is still too traumatized. Michelle looked overwhelmed. This is beyond my scope. If there's evidence of fraud, this needs to go to law enforcement and the fraud investigation unit. We'll handle that, Priest said. But right now, tonight, those 3 children need emergency removal. Can you do that? Michelle looked at Ethan. At his thin frame, his exhausted eyes, the way he flinched when she moved too quickly. She'd seen enough abused kids to recognize one. Yes, she said quietly. I can file for emergency custody, but I need to interview all 3 children separately, and I need to inspect the home. Then let's go. Priest pulled out his phone. Brothers are already stationed at the Mitchell house. Peaceful presence. No interference. But if those foster parents try to run or destroy evidence, we'll know. Michelle's eyes widened. You have people at their house right now? 15 brothers rotating shifts in the street. Public property. Legal. Visible. Reaper crossed his arms. We're not vigilantes, Ms. Garrett. We're witnesses. And we're making sure nobody disappears before you do your job. Now you might be thinking, 100 bikers showing up to a foster home sounds like chaos waiting to happen, like intimidation, like violence brewing under leather and chrome. And maybe years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But this wasn't about intimidation. This was about presence. About making it impossible for evil to hide in plain sight when 103 men refused to look away. Because here's what Karen and David Mitchell hadn't counted on. Their act only worked in private. Their charm, their church-going image, their good Christian couple performance, all of it crumbled when the audience got too big to manipulate. At 7:23 p.m., Michelle Garrett's vehicle pulled up to 3847 Maple Ridge Drive, followed by 2 police cruisers and what looked like a parade of motorcycles. 15 bikes were already parked along the curb. Brothers standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, silent. Not threatening, just present. Karen Mitchell stood on her front porch, phone pressed to her ear, face pale. She wore a cardigan and khaki pants, pearl necklace, the uniform of suburban respectability. Her husband David stood behind her in a polo shirt and jeans, confusion written across his face. They looked exactly like concerned parents worried about a misunderstanding. But when Karen saw the motorcycles, something in her expression shifted. Fear. Real fear. Because performative goodness doesn't work when the audience knows what to look for. Michelle approached the porch with 2 officers flanking her. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Michelle Garrett with Cuyahoga County Children's Services. We need to conduct an emergency welfare check on Sophia and Isabella Martinez. We already had a welfare check 3 weeks ago, Karen said, voice tight. Everything was fine. This is harassment. This is a follow-up investigation based on new evidence. Michelle's voice was professional, firm. I need to inspect the home and interview the children separately. What new evidence? David demanded. Who's making accusations? That's confidential. Please allow us inside. Karen's eyes darted to the bikers. And them? Are they coming inside too? They're staying outside, Michelle said. But they're within their legal rights to observe from public property. Priest stood at the curb, arms crossed, saying nothing. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. Karen and David had no choice. They stepped aside. The inside of the house was exactly what Michelle expected from the previous report. Clean, organized, middle class, comfortable. Family photos on the walls, Christian decor, a home that looked like 1,000 other suburban houses. "I'd like to see the children's bedrooms," Michelle said. Karen led her upstairs, opened a door to a cheerful room with 2 twin beds, stuffed animals, posters of cartoons on the walls. "This is where Sophia and Isabella sleep." Michelle examined the room. Beds made perfectly. Too perfectly. Dust on the nightstand. She ran her finger along the windowsill. More dust. This room wasn't lived in. And Ethan's room? Karen opened another door. Single bed, blue comforter, bookshelf with children's books, desk with a lamp. Also too clean. Also dusty. Michelle turned to Karen. "Where do the children actually sleep?" Karen's face flushed. "I just showed you. Ma'am, these rooms haven't been used in weeks. There's dust on surfaces, the beds are staged, and there are no personal items anywhere. Children leave clutter. These rooms have none." Michelle's voice hardened. "Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Where do the children sleep?" David appeared in the hallway. "They sleep here. You can ask them yourself when they get home from the church youth group." "The children aren't at youth group, Mr. Mitchell. Sophia and Isabella are currently at Riverside Elementary with school personnel, and I need to see where they actually sleep. If you don't show me, I'll get a warrant and have officers search every room. Your choice." Karen and David exchanged a look, a calculation. Then Karen's shoulders slumped. "Basement," she whispered. The basement stairs creaked as Michelle descended. One of the officers followed, hand near his weapon, though he wasn't sure what he expected to find. What he found made him call for backup. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, cinder block walls, no windows. 3 mattresses on the floor, thin blankets, no bed frames. 1 bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. A utility toilet in the corner. No shower. The temperature was cold, 55 degrees maybe, and the air smelled damp, musty. Michelle pulled out her phone, started taking photos. The mattresses. The locked door at the top of the stairs. She'd noticed the deadbolt on the outside. The concrete floor where children slept. "How long have the children been sleeping down here?" she asked, voice shaking with controlled rage. "They prefer it," Karen said from the top of the stairs. "It's quieter. They asked, children don't ask to sleep in an unheated basement on concrete. Children don't ask to be locked in at night." Michelle came back up the stairs. "Officer, I need photos of this entire basement as evidence. And I need statements from both foster parents." David stepped forward, hands raised. "Look, maybe it's not ideal, but we've been doing our best with difficult children. Ethan has behavioral issues. The girls, save it for the investigation." Michelle pulled out her tablet. "I'm filing for emergency removal of all 3 children effective immediately. They will not be returning to this home tonight or any night until a full investigation is completed." Karen's face crumpled. "You can't just take them. We have rights. So do they. And their rights were violated the moment you locked them in a basement." Michelle turned to the officers. "I need to collect the children's belongings, whatever clothes they have, medications, school materials." The officers nodded. One of them went to retrieve the children's actual belongings. He came back with 3 garbage bags containing 4 outfits total for 3 children, no toys, 1 toothbrush, shared, no medications, 2 school notebooks. Everything 3 children owned fit in 3 garbage bags. While Michelle processed the emergency removal, Wire and Prophet were conducting their own investigation door to door. Margaret Thompson, 67, lived at 3845 Maple Ridge Drive. She answered her door to find a biker with wire-rim glasses standing on her porch with a notebook. "Mrs. Thompson?" "I'm Marcus Thompson. No relation. I'm helping document a child welfare case involving your neighbors, the Mitchells. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" Margaret looked past him at the motorcycles lining the street, at the police cars, at the activity at the Mitchell house. "Is this about those foster children?" "Yes, ma'am." She invited him in. 10 minutes later, Wire had her statement. "I saw those children doing yard work in all weather for 7 months. Mowing, raking, weeding, even on 95-degree days, while Karen sat on the porch supervising. I brought them lemonade once, and Karen told me not to coddle them. I watched that oldest boy, Ethan, collapse from heat exhaustion last August. I should have called someone. I should have done something. I see his face every night and I think, I could have helped. I could have stopped this. But I told myself it wasn't my business." Her hands shook as she signed the statement. Robert Chen, 45, lived across the street. He gave a similar testimony. "My daughter invited Ethan to her birthday party. Karen said no, that foster children needed to earn privileges. What kind of person denies a child a birthday party? I saw him walking home in pouring rain last March, soaking wet, no coat, shivering. I drove past him. I could have stopped. I could have given him a ride or at least a jacket. But I didn't. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Now I know. It was exactly my place." Sandra Peterson, church administrative assistant, provided financial testimony. "I process their tithing records. David gives 10% of his $68,000 salary. That's documented. But they've been living way above that income level for years. New cars every 3 years. Expensive home renovations. Designer clothes. I never questioned where the money came from. Now I know they were profiting from those children's suffering while giving God a fraction of what they earned honestly." 3 neighbors. 3 witnesses. 3 people who saw and didn't act. Until tonight. By 8:45 p.m., Prophet had located 2 former foster children. The first was now 16, had been with the Mitchells at age 11. She agreed to a phone interview, voice shaking. "I only lasted 8 months there. I was so hungry all the time. They made me clean their house top to bottom every weekend. When I told my caseworker, Karen said I was lying for attention. They moved me to another home and I was so happy to leave. I tried to forget that place. But when I heard they still had kids, that nobody stopped them, I should have fought harder. I should have made someone believe me." The second former foster child was 14, had been with them at age 9. "They're really good at pretending. When my caseworker came, they'd have us dress nice, smile, say everything was fine. Karen coached us. If you tell the truth, they'll separate you from your siblings. If you tell the truth, you'll go somewhere worse." I believed her. I lied to protect myself. And now other kids got hurt because I was too scared to speak up. Prophet recorded every word. At 9:15 p.m., Wire presented his complete financial analysis to Michelle Garrett and the investigating officers. 5 years of foster care income, $555,000. Documented spending on children, $28,000 total. Missing money, $527,000. That money went into Karen Mitchell's personal accounts, then into investments and savings. They have $240,000 in savings accounts and investment portfolios. This isn't neglect due to poverty. This is systematic financial exploitation. One officer whistled low. "That's fraud. That's embezzlement of state funds." "That's children being used as profit centers," Wire said flatly. At 10:33 p.m., Detective Sarah Ramirez from the Columbus Police Fraud Unit arrived at the Mitchell home. She had warrants, bank records, computer forensics. The whole apparatus of legal investigation descended on 3847 Maple Ridge Drive. Karen and David Mitchell sat in their living room, surrounded by officers, while their entire financial life was dismantled and documented. Karen was crying. David was pale, silent. Detective Ramirez read them their rights. Karen Louise Mitchell and David James Mitchell, you are under arrest for felony child endangerment, fraud, and embezzlement of state funds. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The handcuffs clicked. Karen looked up at the detective. We gave those children a home. We fed them. We clothed them. We did more than anyone else was willing to do. You locked them in a basement, Ramirez said quietly. You starved them while spending their support money on yourselves. You used them as unpaid labor. And you cycled through 11 children over 5 years, collecting over $500,000 while providing minimal care. She leaned down. You didn't give them a home. You gave them a prison, and you charged the state for the privilege. David was escorted to one police car, Karen to another. They were driven away separately, neither looking at the other, both suddenly realizing that their partnership in exploitation was over. The house at 3847 Maple Ridge Drive stood empty, lights still on, evidence tape across the door. And outside, 103 bikers remained. Silent witnesses, making sure everyone knew. This wasn't over. This was just beginning. At 11:47 p.m., less than 8 hours after Ms. Walsh made her first phone call, all 3 children were safe. Ethan, Sophia, and Isabella were placed in emergency foster care with a family who'd been vetted by both CPS and, unusually, by Wire's background check. A family who understood these children would need time, patience, and safety. Bones did medical assessments on all 3 children. His findings were documented for court. All 3 children show signs of chronic malnutrition, inadequate hygiene care, and emotional trauma consistent with long-term neglect. Ethan has bruising at multiple healing stages indicating repeated physical harm. Sophia shows signs of developmental delay, likely due to stress and inadequate nutrition. Isabella, the youngest, exhibits signs of extreme anxiety and fear of adults. All 3 require immediate medical care, nutritional support, and trauma counseling. The emergency foster family, a couple named James and Rita Chen, no relation to the neighbor Robert Chen, were former teachers. Childless by choice but licensed foster parents for 12 years. They had a spare bedroom already set up with 3 beds, understanding that sibling groups need to stay together. When the children arrived at 12:15 a.m., exhausted and terrified, Rita knelt down to their level. You're safe here, she said simply. You have real beds. You can eat whenever you're hungry, and nobody will ever lock you anywhere, okay? Isabella, 6 years old, whispered, Can we really eat? Rita's eyes filled with tears. Sweetheart. Yes. Always. The charges against Karen and David Mitchell were filed the next morning. 4 counts of felony child endangerment, 1 for each of the 3 current children, plus 1 count covering the pattern with previous children. 3 counts of fraud, embezzlement of state funds. 3 counts of false imprisonment, locking children in basement. 2 counts of child labor law violations. 1 count of conspiracy to defraud bond was set at $500,000 each. Far more than they could afford, despite their $500,000 in stolen funds, which were immediately frozen pending restitution. Neither made bond. They would await trial in separate facilities, unable to coordinate stories, unable to perform for each other. The attorney they hired tried to argue for bail reduction. The judge, after reviewing evidence of 103 motorcycles showing up to protect children the system had failed 3 times, denied the motion. The community response alone tells me everything I need to know about the severity of this case, Judge Patricia Morrison said from the bench. When over 100 private citizens feel compelled to physically protect children from their foster parents, the system has clearly failed. Bond remains at $500,000. Trial date set for August 15th. The courtroom was filled with bikers. Every seat taken. Silent. Present. The message was clear. We're watching. Justice will be served. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. 3 days after the arrest, Ms. Walsh returned to her classroom. Room 214 looked the same. Bulletin boards covered in student artwork, reading corner with beanbags, her desk still scattered with papers. But everything was different, because there was an empty desk where Ethan Cooper used to sit. And every time she looked at it, she remembered. 47 days. She'd counted. And because she counted, 3 children were alive. On her desk sat a gray hoodie, folded carefully. Evidence returned after being photographed, measured, documented. The same hoodie Ethan had worn for 47 consecutive school days. Too large, stained, worn thin at the elbows. She picked it up, felt the weight of it. This piece of fabric had hidden so much. Bruises, fear, a child disappearing in plain sight. Her phone buzzed. Text from Reaper. Kids doing okay? Ate breakfast this morning without asking permission first. Small victory. Ms. Walsh smiled through tears. The resolution didn't happen overnight. Recovery never does. But it happened in careful, documented steps, with 103 men making sure every single one was taken. Medical care. Dr. Sarah Martinez, pediatrician, examined all 3 children on May 18th, 3 days after removal. Her findings were thorough and heartbreaking. Ethan. Severely malnourished, showing signs of stunted growth. Height hasn't increased in 8 months, concerning for a child his age. Weight 58 pounds, when he should be 68 to 75 pounds minimum. Bruising consistent with repeated physical harm. Recommendations: nutritional rehabilitation under medical supervision, physical therapy, trauma counseling. Prognosis: with proper care, physical recovery expected within 6 to 8 months. Emotional recovery will take longer. Sophia. Malnourished, exhibiting developmental delays in speech and social interaction likely due to chronic stress and inadequate nutrition. Asthma inadequately managed. Foster parents failed to maintain medication. Recommendations: nutritional support, speech therapy. Asthma management, psychological counseling. Isabella. Youngest and most vulnerable. Shows signs of failure to thrive. Not just physical, but emotional. Extremely anxious around adults, particularly men. Night terrors documented. Recommendations: play therapy, trauma-informed care, consistent routine, patience. Bones coordinated with Dr. Martinez, ensuring smooth transitions between medical appointments. He drove the children himself sometimes, his massive frame somehow comforting to kids who'd learned that scary-looking people could be the safest ones. Therapeutic care. Wire, using his financial investigation skills, identified a therapist who specialized in foster care trauma. Dr. Lisa Chen, no relation to the emergency foster family, agreed to take all 3 children pro bono after hearing their story. She met with them separately at first. Gentle sessions. Art therapy for Isabella, who was too young to verbalize trauma. Talk therapy for Ethan, who needed to release 7 months of carrying everything alone. Play therapy for Sophia, who needed to learn it was okay to be a child again. After the first session, Dr. Chen told Rita, "These children were surviving, not living. They'll need months, maybe years, to fully process what happened. But they're strong. Ethan especially. He protected his foster sisters as much as he could. That resilience will serve him well." Legal protection. Restraining orders filed against Karen and David Mitchell before they even made bail, which they never did. The orders were comprehensive. No contact with children, no contact with emergency foster family, no presence within 1,000 feet of Riverside Elementary School. Priest made sure Detective Ramirez had Wire's financial evidence organized, indexed, cross-referenced. "Make it impossible for their lawyers to muddy the waters," he said. "These kids deserve airtight justice." The prosecutor, Amanda Wilson, was known for aggressive pursuit of child abuse cases. When she saw Wire's documentation, she called him personally. "This is the cleanest financial fraud case I've seen in 10 years. I'm adding charges. By the time I'm done, the Mitchells won't see daylight for a decade." Housing and stability. James and Rita Chen's home became a haven. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 for each child, though the first week all 3 slept in Sophia and Isabella's room together, afraid to be separated even in safety. Rita set up a routine. Breakfast at 7 a.m., always. More food than they could eat. And when they asked, "Can we have seconds?" she said, "Always. You never have to ask permission for food here." Dinner at 6 p.m. Family style, everyone taking what they wanted. The first week, the children hoarded food in their pockets. Rita didn't scold them. She just said, "There's always more tomorrow, but if you want to keep some for later, that's okay too." By week 3, they stopped hoarding. James, former high school teacher, helped with homework. Not pressuring, just available. When Ethan apologized for falling asleep during math practice, James said, "Your brain is healing, buddy. Sleep is part of that. We'll try again tomorrow." Community integration. Teacher. Thomas Morrison, the Hells Angels member who'd been a history teacher, volunteered to tutor all 3 children twice a week. He brought books, games, art supplies, made learning feel safe again. He worked with Ethan on catching up in subjects where he'd fallen behind. Not because Ethan wasn't smart, but because it's hard to learn when you're hungry and terrified. He helped Sophia with reading, using stories about brave kids overcoming obstacles. She related to every single one. He played educational games with Isabella, teaching numbers through building blocks and colors through painting. She started smiling during their sessions. Prophet documented the recovery for the court case, but also for something bigger. He created a presentation about Code Fallen Youth, how it worked, why it mattered, what happened when communities decided to protect vulnerable children. He shared it with other clubs, other cities, other communities that wanted to replicate the model. Wire set up a trust fund for the children's future. Money from the Hells Angels chapters, donations from community members who heard the story, restitution that would eventually come from the Mitchells' frozen accounts. By the end of June, the trust fund held $87,000, enough for college, vocational training, whatever futures these kids chose. School return. On June 2nd, 3 days before the original summer break deadline, Ethan returned to Riverside Elementary. Not as a student finishing the year, it was too late for that, but to collect his belongings and say goodbye to Ms. Walsh. He walked into room 214 wearing new clothes that fit. His hair was clean, cut, neat. His face had more color. He'd gained 4 pounds in 2 weeks, carefully monitored weight gain under Dr. Martinez's supervision. Ms. Walsh stood up from her desk when she saw him. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then Ethan ran to her and hugged her, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for counting." Ms. Walsh held him, crying too. "I'll always count, sweetheart. Every day. Every child. I'll always count." He pulled back, wiped his eyes. Can I keep the hoodie?" She looked at the gray hoodie on her desk, the one that had hidden bruises and hunger and 7 months of suffering. "Why would you want to keep it?" "Because you noticed. For 47 days you counted. You saw me when nobody else did." His voice was stronger now, more confident. "This hoodie reminds me that someone cared enough to count. That I wasn't invisible." Ms. Walsh handed it to him. "Then it's yours." Ethan folded it carefully, held it to his chest. "I'm going to donate it to a foster care advocacy organization, with a note that says, 'This is what noticing looks like. Count the days. See the kids. Financial justice.'" On July 12th, Wire presented his complete financial audit to the prosecutor's office. The final numbers: total foster care income, 2019 to 2025. $555,000 documented spending on children. $28,000 profit. $527,000. Additionally, Wire uncovered life insurance policies on 2 previous foster children. Both children had died while in Mitchell care, one from medical neglect in 2021, one from an accident in 2022. Policies totaled $164,000. Both deaths had been investigated and ruled accidental at the time. Those cases were reopened. The prosecutor added charges: 2 counts of felony murder based on evidence that the Mitchells had deliberately withheld medical care to previous foster children while maintaining life insurance policies. The trial was scheduled for August 15th. The trial lasted 4 days. Every day, the courtroom was filled with Hell's Angels members, silent, present, witness to justice. The prosecution presented medical evidence from Dr. Martinez and Nurse Morrison, photographic documentation of the basement financial records showing $527,000 in profit, testimony from Margaret Thompson, Robert Chen, Sandra Peterson, testimony from 2 former foster children, Ethan's testimony, conducted via closed-circuit video to protect him, Wire's financial analysis, evidence of previous suspicious deaths. The defense tried to argue that the Mitchells were overwhelmed, that they'd made mistakes but meant well, that the children were difficult and damaged. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later, August 29th. Judge Patricia Morrison looked at Karen and David Mitchell, both in orange jumpsuits, both refusing to look at each other. "In 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such calculated exploitation of vulnerable children. You didn't make mistakes. You ran a business. Children were your inventory. Their suffering was your profit margin. And when previous children died under your care, you collected insurance money and moved on to new victims." She paused. Karen Mitchell, 15 years in state prison, no eligibility for parole for 10 years. David Mitchell, 18 years in state prison, no eligibility for parole for 12 years. You will also pay full restitution of $527,000 to a trust fund for your victims, plus additional restitution to the families of the 2 children who died in your care. The gavel fell. Karen sobbed. David sat frozen, stunned. Outside the courthouse, Priest spoke to the assembled media. "This isn't about vengeance. This is about accountability. And this is about making sure every child in the foster care system knows someone is watching. Someone cares. Someone will show up. Behind him, 103 motorcycles lined the street. A promise kept. 6 months later, November 2025, Ethan Michael Cooper stood in the gymnasium of his new school, Lincoln Middle School, at a science fair. His project? The effects of malnutrition on childhood development. It was personal. It was powerful. It was his story, transformed into education. His poster included statistics, research, medical documentation. But the centerpiece was a photograph. A gray hoodie with a placard that read, 47 days, someone counted, someone cared, count the days, see the kids. He won second place. Ms. Walsh attended the science fair. So did Reaper, Priest, Wire, Bones, Teacher, and Prophet. 6 bikers in leather vests standing in a middle school gymnasium, beaming with pride at a 10-year-old boy who'd survived hell and turned it into hope. Ethan's weight, 72 pounds. Healthy for his age. Still slight, but growing. His grades, honor roll. Every subject. Making up for lost time with ferocious determination. His demeanor. Still quiet, still cautious, but smiling more. Making friends, joining the chess club, learning that adults could be trusted. Sophia and Isabella attended the same school, different grades. Sophia was in speech therapy and thriving, her vocabulary expanding weekly. Isabella was in play therapy and slowly, carefully, learning to trust. All 3 children lived with James and Rita Chen. The emergency placement had become permanent. Adoption paperwork was pending, waiting for the children to feel ready. "We're not rushing them," Rita told Ms. Walsh at the science fair. "They've had enough people making decisions for them. When they're ready to be Chens officially, they'll tell us." The broader impact. Angels Watch program, named after Hell's Angels' protective presence, became permanent in Columbus, then expanded to Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, then across Ohio, then to neighboring states. The protocol: community members report suspected child abuse. Local law enforcement investigates. If systems fail, Code Fallen Youth activates. Bikers provide protective presence, witness testimony, evidence-gathering support. Legal. Documented. Effective. In the first year after Ethan's rescue, Angels Watch responded to 23 cases across 4 states. 23 children removed from danger. 17 abusers prosecuted. 6 foster care agencies investigated for systemic failures. The program became a case study in social work schools. Community-based child protection models. Wire wrote a manual. Financial red flags in foster care fraud. Distributed to CPS agencies nationwide. Teacher developed curriculum, recognizing signs of child abuse for educators. Used in teacher training programs. Prophet created documentary. 47 Days, How One Teacher's Observation Exposed Systematic Exploitation. Released on YouTube. 2.3 million views in 6 months. Bones trained first responders. Medical assessment of neglected children. Adopted by EMT programs. Priest spoke at conferences. From tragedy to action. Building community protection networks. Standing room only. Ms. Walsh received the Ohio Teacher of the Year Award in 2026. Her acceptance speech was 3 minutes long. She spent 2.5 minutes talking about Ethan, Sophia, and Isabella. The last 30 seconds were simple. Pay attention. Count the days. See the children. That's all it takes to save a life. 1 year later, May 15th, 2026. It was the anniversary. 1 year since Ms. Walsh had kept Ethan after class. 1 year since a gray hoodie had hidden bruises that exposed a fraud scheme. 1 year since 103 motorcycles had descended on Riverside Elementary and changed everything. The Hells Angels Columbus chapter held a community event at their clubhouse. Not a party. A vigil. A remembrance. A promise. Families attended. Former foster children who'd found healing. Social workers who'd learned to look deeper. Teachers who'd learned to count. Community members who'd learned to speak up. Ethan, Sophia, and Isabella were there, standing with James and Rita Chen, who'd finalized the adoption 3 weeks earlier. The children's last names were legally Chen now. Their choice, their family. Priest stood at a microphone in the center of the clubhouse, 103 brothers behind him, community members in front of him. "We're here because one teacher counted to 47, he said. "We're here because one child was brave enough to show his bruises. We're here because 103 men decided that protecting children mattered more than anything else they had to do that day." He paused. "Katie, my daughter, died 27 years ago because nobody showed up for her. I couldn't save her. But because of what we learned from losing her, we saved Ethan. We saved Sophia. We saved Isabella. And we'll keep saving kids as long as there are kids who need saving." The crowd was silent. "This isn't a biker story," Priest continued. "This is a community story. Margaret Thompson, who testified even though it hurt. Robert Chen, who admitted he should have helped sooner. Sandra Peterson, who exposed financial patterns. Ms. Walsh, who counted days. Wire, who followed money trails. Bones, who documented injuries. Teacher, who helped kids learn again. Prophet, who made sure the story was told. Reaper, who answered his sister's call." He looked at Ethan. "And this young man, who survived 7 months of hell and turned it into hope for other kids. That's the story. That's what we're here to remember." Ethan stepped forward. He'd asked to speak. Ms. Walsh had helped him write it, but the words were his. "I'm 11 now," he said, voice quiet but steady. "I'm in 6th grade. I'm on the honor roll. I'm in chess club. I have friends. I have a family. I have enough to eat. I have a bed that's warm. I have people who care about me." He took a breath. "But I almost didn't. If Ms. Walsh hadn't counted, if she'd looked away like everyone else, I don't know if I'd be here. Maybe I'd still be in that basement. Maybe I'd be dead like the kids before me. I don't know." His voice strengthened. "But I'm here because people showed up. Scary-looking people. People with motorcycles and leather jackets and patches that are supposed to mean danger. But they were the safest people I'd ever met. Because they didn't just say they cared. They proved it." He looked at Priest, at Reaper, at all 103 men who'd shown up for him. "So if you're listening to this story, if you're hearing about what happened, here's what I want you to know. You don't need a motorcycle to save someone. You don't need 103 friends. You just need to pay attention. Count the days. Notice when something's wrong. And care enough to do something about it." He held up his phone, showed a photo on the screen. The gray hoodie, now framed and hanging in a foster care advocacy center in downtown Columbus. 47 days. Someone counted. Someone cared. That's all it took. The message. This story isn't really about bikers or patches or motorcycles roaring to the rescue. It's about a teacher who paid attention. It's about a child who found courage to show his bruises. It's about a community that decided enough was enough. And it's about the simple, powerful act of noticing, of counting, of refusing to look away when a child is disappearing in plain sight. Because here's the truth that Karen and David Mitchell never understood. Evil relies on silence. It thrives in isolation. It wins when communities choose comfort over confrontation, when neighbors choose politeness over protection, when systems choose efficiency over empathy. But when one person counts to 47, when one teacher documents the same gray hoodie for 47 consecutive school days, that silence shatters. When 103 men show up to say, "We're watching, we're witnessing, we're not walking away," evil loses its camouflage. When a community decides that protecting children matters more than avoiding awkward conversations with neighbors, predators lose their power. If you've ever felt invisible, this story is for you. Because Ethan felt invisible for 7 months until someone counted. If you've ever doubted that one person can make a difference, this story is for you. Because Ms. Walsh was just one teacher with a notebook and a conscience. If you've ever looked at someone scary and assumed danger, this story is for you. Because the men who saved Ethan looked like nightmares, but acted like angels. There are Ethans everywhere, in schools, in foster homes, in churches, in neighborhoods. Children disappearing in plain sight while adults make excuses or look away or convince themselves that someone else will handle it. You don't need 103 motorcycles to change a story. You need to pay attention. Listen when a child hesitates. Notice when someone wears the same clothes for weeks. Ask uncomfortable questions. Care enough to intervene even when your voice shakes. Count the days. See the kids. Show up. Because the difference between Ethan thriving today and Ethan dying in that basement came down to one simple choice. A teacher decided to count. What are you counting? What are you noticing? What child in your orbit needs someone to show up? The gray hoodie hanging in that advocacy center isn't just a memorial, it's a challenge. Count, notice, care, act. That's how you save a life. If this story moved you, subscribe to Gentle Bikers and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell us, who was your Ms. Walsh? Who showed up when nobody else did? Or if you're still waiting for someone to notice, tell us. We're listening. This community is watching. You are not invisible. And if you're a teacher, a neighbor, a community member who sees a child struggling, don't wait 47 days. Count to 1. Notice today, because every day counts when a child is suffering. We'll be back next week with another story about people who showed up when systems failed. Until then, remember, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they carry notebooks. Sometimes they're just ordinary people who refused to look away. Stay gentle. Stay vigilant. Stay ready to show up. Ms. Walsh keeps a photograph on her desk now. Ethan at his 6th grade science fair, standing next to his award-winning project, surrounded by 6 bikers in leather vests, all of them grinning like proud uncles. The caption reads, 47 days. Someone counted. And every morning when she walks into room 214, she looks at that photograph and remembers. Every child deserves to be counted. Every single one.